When a black CO was kicked out of his VIP seat just to please a white passenger, the flight crew thought they could get away with it, but 5 minutes later, the unthinkable happened, and every single crew member paid the price. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, because stories like this deserve to be heard. And I want to know your thoughts. Was this justice or just karma catching up? Drop your opinion in the comments below. Marcus Williams had always believed that success could silence prejudice, that if he just worked hard enough, earned enough, and stayed disciplined, the world would eventually treat him fairly. He was wrong. Born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, Marcus grew up in a small 2-bedroom apartment with his mother, Clara, who cleaned houses by day and worked as a hospital janitor by night. She used to tell him, "Son, the world may not hand you respect, but it can't take away what you've earned." And he'd lived by those words ever since. Now, standing inside the VIP terminal of Los Angeles International Airport, Marcus straightened his suit jacket, deep navy, custom-tailored, and looked at the boarding pass in his hand. Flight 226 to New York City, Seat 1A, First Class. This wasn't just another flight. Tomorrow, Marcus was scheduled to sign the biggest deal of his life, a $200 million merger that would make Skyrise Innovations, his tech company, a leader in renewable energy. For the first time, he felt like everything his mother had sacrificed was paying off. But success, he'd learned, had a strange way of drawing both admiration and resentment. As he walked into the first-class lounge, conversations quieted just a bit. A few glances followed him, subtle, curious, assessing. He smiled politely, ignoring the whisper of judgment that seemed to hang in the air. A middle-aged man in a gray business suit glanced at Marcus and smiled. "Hey, are you with one of the NBA teams?" Marcus gave a calm, practiced smile. "No, sir. Just business." The man blinked, nodded awkwardly, then buried his face back into his phone. Marcus had seen that reaction 1,000 times before. They didn't mean harm, but they didn't expect him to belong here either. He found a corner seat, opened his laptop, and checked his email one last time. His assistant, Jordan, had texted, "Safe travels, boss. I'll have the New York team ready for the signing." Marcus smiled. Everything was on track. When the boarding call finally echoed, "Now boarding, Flight 226 to New York, first-class passengers." Marcus packed his laptop neatly, slipped on his gold cufflinks, and made his way to Gate 12B. At the counter, the gate attendant scanned his ticket. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Williams," she said with a polite smile. He nodded and stepped onto the jet bridge. The air smelled of jet fuel and recycled air, sharp but familiar. Inside the cabin, soft jazz played faintly as he found his seat, 1A, the very front, by the window. He placed his briefcase beneath the seat in front, reclined slightly and exhaled. Finally, a moment to breathe. Outside the window, the California sun washed the tarmac in gold. He thought about the journey, from repairing old computers in his mother's kitchen to being featured on Forbes' Top 30 Innovators Under 40. It hadn't been luck. It was sweat, persistence, and a refusal to give up when others told him to. As more passengers boarded, the cabin filled with chatter. A white couple in their late 40s entered, dressed elegantly, the woman in pearls, the man in a crisp beige blazer. They paused at Marcus's row, confusion spreading across their faces. The woman frowned. "Excuse me," she said sharply to the attendant. "There must be a mistake. My husband and I are supposed to be sitting here." Marcus looked up, calm and polite. "This is seat 1A, he said, showing his boarding pass. The attendant checked the passes. Both were marked 1A and 1B. She looked uncertain, then turned to Marcus. "Sir, could you please hold on just a second?" The woman sighed loudly. "This is ridiculous. We paid extra for VIP comfort. Surely there's another seat he can take." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The attendant leaned closer. "Sir, would you mind moving just for a bit while we sort this out?" Marcus stared at her, his expression controlled. "Ma'am, my boarding pass says 1A. I'd prefer to stay in my assigned seat." Her professional smile wavered. "Please, sir, don't make a scene." The woman crossed her arms. "Unbelievable," she muttered under her breath. Other passengers were now watching. A few whispered. Marcus could feel the weight of every stare, the silent judgment, the quiet assumption that he was the problem. The attendant hesitated, then turned back. "Sir, I'm going to ask again. Please relocate to another seat so we can accommodate our guests." Marcus took a slow breath. His heart was pounding, but his voice stayed calm. "You're asking me to give up the seat I paid for because someone else feels entitled to it. Is that correct?" No answer, just an awkward silence. After a tense pause, Marcus nodded once. Without another word, he picked up his briefcase and stood. The woman smiled faintly, victory flashing across her face. The attendant quickly led Marcus toward an empty seat in business class, murmuring, "Thank you for understanding, sir." Marcus sat quietly, staring at the floor. The humiliation burned, not because of the seat, but because of what it represented. After all his success, all his years of breaking barriers, it still came down to this. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to breathe evenly. But inside, something in him had shifted. Because what they didn't know, what no one on that plane knew, was that Marcus Williams wasn't just any CEO. He was a member of the board of directors of the very airline they worked for. And in 5 minutes, that small act of discrimination would turn into a corporate earthquake that would end careers before the plane even touched down. The hum of the aircraft filled the cabin as passengers settled in, stowing their luggage and adjusting seatbelts. Marcus sat motionless in his new seat in business class, staring blankly at the back of the seat in front of him. A small child across the aisle laughed, tugging at a tablet. Someone behind him was already ordering a drink. Life around him continued as if nothing had happened. But inside Marcus, something cold and sharp was forming, not anger, not sadness, resolve. He turned slightly toward the window. From this seat, he couldn't even see the first-class cabin anymore, but he could hear faint echoes of laughter, the kind of laughter that comes from comfort, privilege, and power. And somewhere up there, a woman who had demanded his seat was reclining in luxury, sipping champagne in the spot that he'd paid for. The flight attendant who had escorted him earlier passed by, avoiding his eyes. Marcus spoke softly. "Excuse me." She froze, then turned, forcing a smile. "Yes, sir?" "Has the seating issue been resolved?" he asked. Her smile flickered. "Yes, sir. Everything's been handled." "I see." He nodded. "Handled." She gave a quick nod and hurried off before he could say anything more. Marcus leaned back, eyes steady, lips pressed into a thin line. Years of boardrooms, negotiations, and pressure had trained him to hide emotion, but this wasn't a negotiation. This was something else. A flight attendant's voice came over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 226 with service to New York City. We'll be taking off shortly, so please ensure your seats are in the upright position and all electronic devices are switched to airplane mode." Marcus reached for his phone. He didn't switch it off. Instead, he opened his contacts and scrolled to a name few people in the world would ever recognize: Herald Airline HQ. He hesitated. His finger hovered over the call button. He wasn't the kind of man who acted out of emotion. But this wasn't about pride anymore. It was about principle. He pressed send. The ringing began, once, twice, before a voice answered. "Marcus? You're on your way to New York, right?" Marcus spoke quietly. "I am. Flight 226. "All right, what's up?" He looked toward the first-class curtain, the fabric barrier separating comfort from everything else. "I just got asked to move from my assigned seat," he said calmly. "Seat 1A. Apparently, someone else was more comfortable there." The pause. Then a low, concerned tone. "Wait, you mean they made you move?" "Yes." "Do they know who you are?" Marcus's tone didn't change. "That's not important. What's important is that this is still happening. In 2025. On our airline." There was silence on the other end, then a slow exhale. "Understood. I'll handle it." Marcus ended the call. His thumb hovered over the screen for a moment before locking the phone. He didn't need to say anything else. Outside, the engines began to roar. The plane trembled slightly as it started rolling down the runway. He placed his hand on the armrest, steady but firm. The attendant's voice echoed again, cheerful and oblivious. "Cabin crew, prepare for takeoff." The cabin lights dimmed. Marcus looked out the window, the runway lights stretching endlessly ahead, glowing gold against the darkening sky. As the plane accelerated, a strange calm washed over him. He didn't look angry anymore. Just patient. The aircraft lifted off the ground. Minutes later, once they were cruising smoothly, the head flight attendant, the same woman who'd asked him to move, appeared in the aisle. Her expression was stiff, rehearsed. She stopped beside Marcus, hesitated, then said quietly, "Sir, would you like a drink?" Marcus didn't look up. "No, thank you." She lingered, unsure of what to say next. "I wanted to apologize if you felt uncomfortable earlier," she added. "It was a seating issue and—" He cut her off gently. "It wasn't a seating issue," he said. "It was a judgment issue." The words hung in the air. Her posture shifted slightly, the color in her face fading. "Sir, I didn't mean—" "You didn't have to," Marcus said softly, finally looking at her. "You already did." The attendant swallowed, then stepped back quickly. "Make sure you're comfortable for the rest of the flight." He nodded once, dismissively. She walked away, her heels clicking against the floor. Faster now. Marcus leaned back again, hands clasped loosely in his lap. Around him, passengers scrolled on phones, dozed, whispered. None of them knew what was coming. The seatbelt light flickered off. Across the cabin, another attendant whispered something into her earpiece, her eyes darting toward Marcus's row. A nervous look crossed her face. She moved briskly to the front. Minutes later, the curtain to first class rustled. The head attendant, the one in charge, peeked through, looking tense. She spoke to the others in hushed tones. Marcus didn't move. He watched their reflection in the window. They were whispering his name now. He saw the uncertainty, the confusion, the quiet panic of people realizing something wasn't right. Then one attendant approached cautiously. "Mr. Williams," she said, voice shaky. "The captain would like to speak with you privately once we land." Marcus turned his head slightly, eyes calm but cold. "Tell your captain I'll speak to him," he said. "But I won't be the only one in that conversation." Her mouth opened slightly. She didn't know what to say. Marcus's phone buzzed once on his lap, a single notification lighting up the screen. "Corporate aware. Do not engage. Immediate investigation in motion." He locked the screen again, slipping the phone into his jacket. For the first time, the attendants looked nervous, whispering to each other, stealing glances his way. Something invisible had shifted in the cabin. Marcus turned his gaze back toward the window, expression unreadable. The plane glided steadily through the sky, but the air inside had grown heavy. 5 minutes ago, they had seen him as someone they could dismiss. Now, they didn't even know who they were dealing with. And when they landed, they would find out. Because the quiet man in seat 4C wasn't just another passenger. He was about to change everything. You see how fast things are falling apart, and this is just the beginning. If you're still here, it means you're feeling every second of this story, so don't just watch it happen. Hit that subscribe button now, because what's coming next will leave you shocked. And tell me in the comments, do you think Marcus will fight back or walk away? The flight glided through the clouds, smooth and steady. To anyone watching, Marcus Williams looked completely calm, phone tucked away, eyes fixed on the silver line of the horizon. But beneath that calm, things were already in motion far above the crew's pay grade. 3 minutes after his silent message was sent, the chain reaction had begun. At Horizon Air's corporate headquarters in Dallas, Texas, a notification pinged on the phone of the company's vice president of operations, Harold Briggs. He frowned when he saw the sender, Marcus Williams. Within seconds, he was on the phone with the CEO. "There's an incident involving Marcus on Flight 226, Harold said sharply. "What kind of incident?" "He was asked to move from his assigned VIP seat for another passenger." Silence filled the line. Then the CEO's voice, cold and clipped. "Do they know who they just did that to?" Harold exhaled. "Not yet." "Then it's time they find out." He hung up, turned to his assistant and barked, "Get me the flight director." Now. Back on Flight 226, Marcus hadn't moved. The attendants passed by, whispering quietly, their faces tighter than before. Something had shifted. They could feel it, even if they didn't understand it yet. A faint chime sounded overhead. One of the attendants paused mid-step and touched her earpiece. Her eyes widened slightly. She turned, glanced toward Marcus, then hurried up the aisle. The head attendant, the one who had first confronted Marcus, was called to the front. She vanished behind the first-class curtain for nearly 5 minutes. When she reappeared, her face had lost its color. She approached Marcus slowly, forcing a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Williams," she said softly, "would you like to move back to your original seat in first class? It's been—" "No," he interrupted, his tone even. "I'm fine here." She swallowed. "Sir, please it would—" "I said I'm fine," Marcus repeated. Then he looked up at her, not angry, just steady. "You already made your choice. Let's live with it." The attendant's throat tightened. She nodded quickly, backing away. Passengers nearby glanced between them, unsure what to think. A businessman a few rows back leaned toward another passenger. "What's going on?" The other man shrugged. "No idea. But the staff looks freaked out." Within minutes, another chime sounded, this time from the cockpit. The captain's voice came over the intercom, too calm to be natural. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're expecting some light turbulence ahead, so please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." There was no turbulence. It was a cover. The captain turned to his co-pilot once the microphone clicked off. "Headquarters just sent a direct order," he said quietly. "They want full identification on passenger Marcus Williams. They said he's an executive board member." The co-pilot blinked. "Wait, our board?" The captain nodded grimly. "Yeah." And apparently, he was removed from his seat by crew discretion. The cockpit fell silent. The co-pilot muttered under his breath, "We're dead." Meanwhile, in the cabin, the tension thickened. The head attendant returned again, kneeling slightly beside Marcus's seat. "Mr. Williams, the captain would like to personally apologize for the misunderstanding and offer you." "I don't need his apology," Marcus said flatly, "but I will speak to him when we land." Her voice trembled now. "Of course." She stood, smoothing her uniform with shaky hands. Her smile was gone. Every movement was mechanical, as if she was just trying to make it through the flight without breaking down. Marcus stayed silent. He wasn't interested in their panic. He was interested in what came next. 20 rows behind, a few passengers started whispering about him. His calmness, his authority, the strange energy that had settled over the cabin. One woman leaned toward her husband. "I think that man's important," she said quietly. Her husband nodded. "You can tell. He's not scared, they are." Another message came through the cabin phone. The flight attendants gathered near the galley, whispering frantically. The lead attendant's voice cracked as she said, "They want everyone's names logged and forwarded before landing. Including ours." The younger attendant looked horrified. "Are we in trouble?" The lead attendant didn't answer. At 32,000 feet, the hierarchy had shifted. The once confident crew who'd brushed off Marcus now couldn't even look him in the eye. Every small action, offering water, walking down the aisle, collecting trash, was done nervously, like they were walking on glass. Marcus remained still, the glow of the cabin lights reflecting off his watch. His phone buzzed again, lighting up with another message. "Public relations notified. CEO aware. Ground team waiting on arrival." He didn't smile. He just placed the phone face down on the tray. The woman who had taken his original seat in first class peeked from behind the curtain, curiosity written all over her face. She could tell something was happening, something that suddenly made her victory feel hollow. Marcus met her eyes for half a second before she looked away, pretending to sip her drink. As the flight continued, one of the attendants, the youngest, probably new, approached Marcus hesitantly. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Sir, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't agree with what happened earlier." Marcus looked up at her, studying her expression. She meant it. He nodded once. Thank you. Her eyes softened, then she hurried away before anyone noticed her talking to him. The announcement came over the speakers again. Cabin crew, prepare for descent. Outside, the city lights of New York shimmered beneath the clouds. The skyline glowed, beautiful, oblivious to the storm brewing inside this plane. Marcus straightened his jacket. The crew moved quietly, performing the landing checklist, their voices hushed, movements tight. The air felt heavier now, like everyone was holding their breath. When the wheels finally touched down on the runway, no one clapped, no one cheered. It was the most silent landing Marcus had ever experienced. The captain's voice returned, more subdued than before. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New York. Please remain seated until the seatbelt sign has been turned off. Marcus unbuckled slowly, but didn't move. Through the window, he could see two black corporate sedans and a silver SUV waiting beside the jet bridge, something that didn't happen for normal passengers. The lead attendant glanced out the same window, her face turning pale. "Oh my God," she whispered. The other attendants followed her gaze. They knew immediately this wasn't a routine arrival. Marcus stood, retrieved his briefcase, and waited silently as the first-class passengers gathered their things. He didn't rush. He didn't need to. The moment the seatbelt light turned off, the captain stepped out of the cockpit, something rare. His hat was off, his expression strained. He walked straight toward Marcus, stopping 2 feet away. "Mr. Williams," he said quietly, "I just received a call from corporate. They'd like me to escort you off the plane personally." Marcus looked him directly in the eye. "Then do it." Passengers nearby turned in confusion, whispering as they watched. The attendants froze in place, their faces pale with dread. As Marcus stepped into the aisle, the captain followed him. The crew's eyes followed too, not with authority this time, but with fear. The lead attendant tried to speak. "Sir, please, if we could just explain." Marcus stopped, turned slowly and faced her. The cabin went silent. "You already did," he said. "When you made me move." The attendant's lips trembled, her voice breaking. "Mr. Williams, I—" But he raised a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. His tone was low, calm, final. "You'll explain to them," he said, nodding toward the open door of the plane. Beyond it, 3 men in black suits were waiting on the jet bridge, clipboards in hand, corporate investigators. The passengers watched in disbelief as Marcus walked off first, calm, collected, powerful. The captain followed, but the attendants hesitated at the doorway, dread pooling in their stomachs. Because they knew, once they stepped off that plane, their world was about to collapse. And none of them would ever fly for this airline again. The cabin doors opened with a metallic hiss. The humid New York air swept into the plane, cutting through the cold tension that had frozen everyone in place. Marcus stepped out first, his expression unreadable. Behind him, the captain followed, trying to keep his composure as the terminal lights reflected off his face. 3 men in dark suits were waiting at the jet bridge. They didn't smile, didn't greet him casually, they simply nodded. One of them stepped forward and extended a hand. "Mr. Williams," he said firmly. "Corporate security and operations. We've been expecting you." Marcus nodded once. "I know." The men flanked him as they began walking toward the terminal. Behind them, the flight attendants hesitated in the doorway, frozen. The head attendant whispered to her team, "Don't say anything unless they ask you directly." But they could already see the crowd forming near gate C-17. Cameras. Phones. Reporters. Someone had leaked what happened mid-flight, maybe a passenger who caught the argument on camera. By the time Marcus and the corporate men reached the terminal floor, the whispers had already turned into a low murmur. "That's him," someone said. "The guy they kicked out of his seat." A young woman near the gate held up her phone, recording. "Oh my God, it's real. This is that CEO from Horizon Holdings. The flight crew kicked him out for a white passenger." Within minutes, social media was exploding. The hashtag VIP seat scandal was trending across Twitter and TikTok before Marcus even reached the waiting area. The crew finally disembarked, their steps heavy, faces pale. They didn't know whether to keep their heads down or apologize, Every direction looked dangerous. The head attendant, Sandra, tried to approach Marcus, but one of the security officers raised a hand. "Ma'am, please step back. You'll have your turn." She froze, lips trembling. "I just want to explain." Marcus didn't turn to look at her. "You'll explain to them," he said, nodding toward the arriving executives walking briskly from the gate corridor. At the center of that group was Harold Briggs, the VP of Operations, and beside him, the airline's PR director and head of HR. Their presence meant one thing: this wasn't being handled quietly. "Marcus," Harold greeted, extending his hand carefully. "We're deeply sorry about what happened. We've reviewed the message you sent and the flight report." Marcus looked at him coolly. "Then you know what to do." Harold nodded grimly and turned toward the captain and crew. "Captain Owens. Lead attendant Sandra. Step forward." Passengers nearby stopped moving, watching as the group gathered in the open terminal, a public confrontation unfolding in real time. Phones were raised. Cameras were recording. Harold's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Do you know who you removed from his seat today?" The captain swallowed hard. "We didn't realize." "That wasn't my question," Harold interrupted sharply. "You removed a passenger from a confirmed VIP seat, a company-owned priority slot, to accommodate a request from another traveler. Correct?" Sandra nodded weakly. "Yes, sir, but she was upset. And in doing so," Harold continued, his tone rising, "you humiliated one of our highest-ranking board members, a black executive who literally funds the operations of this airline. Did that seem like a wise decision?" Gasps rippled through the nearby crowd. Someone muttered, "He's a board member?" Another whispered, "They're done." Sandra's face flushed with panic. "Sir, we didn't know who he was. We just—" Harold cut her off again. "You didn't need to know who he was to know what was right. You don't treat anyone that way." Marcus stood silently, hands folded, watching the exchange unfold. His silence carried more power than any words could. The PR director, a stern woman in her 40s, stepped forward, her voice sharp and precise. "This incident is already circulating online. We're preparing a public statement. In the meantime, all flight crew from Flight 226 are to be suspended immediately pending investigation." The attendants froze. One of them, the youngest, the same one who had quietly apologized to Marcus earlier, started tearing up. "Please, I didn't do anything wrong," she whispered. Harold's tone softened slightly toward her. "We know. You'll be interviewed separately." Then he turned back to Sandra. "But you, and the captain, made the call. You'll answer for it." Sandra looked helplessly toward the captain, who had gone pale. He opened his mouth to speak, but Harold raised a hand again. "Don't," he warned. "You had every chance to do the right thing in that cabin. You failed." Reporters had now swarmed closer, asking questions, microphones flashing. "Mr. Briggs, is it true the crew discriminated against a black passenger? Will Horizon Airlines issue a public apology? Is the victim really an executive from your parent company?" Harold tried to wave them off, but Marcus finally turned, his calm voice cutting through the noise. "Yes," he said clearly, addressing the reporters. "I was the passenger removed. And yes, it was because of the color of my skin. But this isn't just about me, it's about how easily people abuse power when they think no one's watching." The terminal went silent for a second. Cameras zoomed in. Every journalist there knew this was the headline moment. He continued, his tone sharp but composed. "This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a decision, one they made with confidence because they assumed I wouldn't matter. That's the real issue here." The reporters erupted with follow-up questions, but Marcus raised a hand. "No further comments." He turned back toward Harold. "Handle it properly. Publicly." Harold nodded once. "You have my word." The crew stood there, frozen, as two HR representatives began escorting them aside for formal statements. Sandra tried to reach out again. "Mr. Williams, please, if I could just apologize." Marcus looked at her, his eyes steady, voice low. "You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry someone saw it." The line hit harder than any punishment could. Sandra's composure cracked. Tears welled up as she looked down at the floor, her uniform now feeling like a weight she couldn't carry. The younger attendant, trembling, turned toward Marcus. "Sir, can I ask, will we lose our jobs?" Marcus paused. "That's not up to me anymore." Security officers stepped in, leading the crew away as the crowd parted. Phones followed them, the once confident team now reduced to a walk of shame across the terminal floor. The PR director leaned toward Harold. "We need to issue a statement within the hour. The footage is already viral." Harold sighed. "Do it. Acknowledge fault. Make it clear this company doesn't tolerate racism in any form." As Marcus began walking toward the exit, the captain finally broke. "Mr. Williams," he called out. Marcus stopped. The captain approached slowly, guilt written all over his face. "I should have stopped it. I saw what was happening and I let it happen. I'm sorry." Marcus studied him for a long moment. "Then make sure it never happens again, no matter who's in that seat." The captain nodded, eyes glassy, before being led away with the rest of his crew. Outside the terminal glass, the flashing lights of news vans and police vehicles painted the tarmac in red and blue. The world was watching now. Marcus walked toward the waiting car, trailed by corporate security. But just before stepping in, he paused and turned toward the reporters still filming. "Racism hides in small decisions," he said quietly. "Sometimes, it takes a public moment to expose a private prejudice." Then he entered the car, the door shutting with a final click. The vehicle pulled away, leaving the terminal chaos behind. But inside, the airline's top executives were just beginning their emergency meeting, and the fallout was about to get much worse. Because one of those viral videos wasn't just trending. It was being reviewed by a government discrimination task force. And the consequences would reach far beyond a single flight crew. This story just exploded, and the deeper Marcus digs, the darker it gets. If you've made it this far, you already know this isn't just a story, it's a wake-up call. Hit that subscribe and like button right now so you don't miss what happens next, because the next chapter will change everything. And tell me in the comments, do you think Marcus is ready for the storm he just unleashed? The next morning, the sun rose over Manhattan, but the mood inside Horizon Air headquarters was anything but calm. Floor 27, Executive Wing. The tension was thick enough to feel in the air. The conference room looked like a newsroom in crisis, screens glowing with headlines, phones buzzing nonstop, assistants rushing in and out. On every monitor, the same story replayed from different angles. Blaxo removed from VIP seat. Entire crew suspended. Racism in the skies. Corporate board member humiliated mid-flight. Horizon Air under fire, so demands accountability. Marcus's face was everywhere, composed, calm, yet powerful. The still image of him walking through the terminal surrounded by security had already become iconic, a symbol of silent defiance. Harold Briggs stood at the end of the table, shoulders stiff, eyes red from a sleepless night. "We're in damage control mode," he said, voice low but sharp. The footage hit 40 million views overnight. News outlets are calling this the biggest corporate discrimination scandal of the year. The PR director, Angela, flipped through her report. "We've issued a public apology and suspended the crew. But that's not enough. Activist groups are calling for federal oversight, and the FAA wants a statement." The airline CEO, Richard Halloway, sat at the head of the table, a man in his 60s with silver hair and an expression that could cut steel. "Where's Marcus?" he asked quietly. Harold hesitated. "He hasn't returned calls. I think he's letting this play out." Richard leaned back, tapping his pen on the table. "Smart man. But we can't just let the narrative run unchecked. This isn't just a PR issue, this is legal." Angela nodded. "Civil rights attorneys are circling. We need to show immediate reform. Diversity audits, retraining, disciplinary restructuring, something public." The head of HR interjected, "We've identified the crew's full chain of command." The captain admitted he approved the seat reassignment under pressure from a demanding passenger, a woman named Lauren Pierce, Platinum Tier member. Angela frowned. "She's not press, is she?" "No. Wealthy socialite. Daughter of a senator." The room went silent. Richard's eyes narrowed. So that's what this was about. Privilege and power. Harold exhaled. We need to decide, do we defend our staff, or do we side with Marcus publicly? Richard didn't even blink. We side with truth. And the truth is ugly. The sooner we clean it, the sooner we survive. He turned toward Angela. Prepare a full press conference. I'll address the nation myself. Angela nodded, already texting her team. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus sat in his office at Horizon Holdings, the parent company that partially owned Horizon Air. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the skyline, but his focus was on the 3 incoming calls lighting up his desk phone: media requests, legal consults, board members. He ignored them all. Instead, he opened his laptop and pulled up a live feed, the company's internal Slack channel. Thousands of employees were posting messages of outrage, solidarity, and disbelief. Sir, they just posted the internal memo, his assistant, Chloe, said as she entered, clutching a tablet. They're launching an internal review, led by you. Marcus looked up slowly. Me? She nodded. The CEO requested it personally. Marcus closed the laptop. Then I'll do it. Chloe hesitated. Sir, there's something else. The woman, Lauren Pierce, she's speaking out. Marcus frowned. What did she say? Chloe played a clip from a morning news broadcast. Lauren appeared on screen, her voice calm but defensive. I never meant for it to become racial. I was uncomfortable sitting next to him because I had allergies, and he refused to move. It had nothing to do with race. Marcus's jaw tightened. Allergies, he repeated quietly. That's her excuse. Chloe turned the screen toward him again. She's being coached. Her father's PR team is behind that statement. Marcus stood up, his tone dark and steady. Then let's show them what accountability looks like. He walked to the window, phone in hand. Get me Harold, he said. Within minutes, Harold's voice came through. Marcus, thank God you called. The situation's spiraling. I know, Marcus said. We're not going to patch this up with a press release. We're going to expose the system that allowed it. Harold hesitated. You're talking about going public again? Marcus looked out over the skyline. No, Harold. I'm talking about going deeper. At noon, the press conference began. Cameras clicked. Reporters filled the room. So Richard Halloway stepped up to the podium, flanked by Harold, Angela, and the head of HR. Good afternoon, he began solemnly. What happened aboard Flight 226 was unacceptable, not just as a corporate error, but as a moral one. Discrimination has no seat on our planes. He paused as flashes burst in his face. We have initiated an independent investigation led by Mr. Marcus Williams, a senior board member whose integrity represents the values this company was built on. The crowd buzzed immediately. Is this the same Marcus Williams who was removed from his seat? Will he be compensated? Has the flight crew been terminated? Richard answered calmly. Actions will follow the truth. Mr. Williams has my full authority to uncover it. Back in his office, Marcus watched the conference live, expression unreadable. He didn't crave the spotlight, but this time, he wasn't going to let the truth get buried. Chloe entered again. Sir, CNN wants you on Anderson Live tonight. They want your first official statement. Marcus didn't respond right away. Instead, he walked to his desk and opened a folder labeled Confidential, Flight 226 Internal Report. Inside were the transcripts from the flight log, crew statements, and passenger records. And buried near the bottom, a single note stood out. Reassignment approved via VIP override. Source, Director of Customer Relations, Pierce. Marcus froze. Pierce. Lauren Pierce wasn't just a passenger. She had corporate clearance. He picked up the phone again. Harold, I need access to the VIP override system. Now. Harold sounded confused. That's handled by upper management. Why? Because this wasn't just a flight attendant's mistake, Marcus said slowly. It was a decision made from above. And someone used that override to move her seat before we even boarded. A long silence. Then Harold whispered, You think this was premeditated? Marcus closed the folder, his jaw set. I think this goes deeper than anyone's ready to admit. Before Harold could reply, Marcus's second phone lit up, a private line. A known number. He hesitated, then answered. A familiar female voice came through. Polished. Dangerous. Mr. Williams, she said. This is Senator Pierce. Marcus's chest tightened. I believe we should discuss what happened before things escalate, she continued. You don't want to make an enemy out of Washington, do you? Marcus said nothing for a moment. Then his voice dropped. Ma'am, with all due respect, racism isn't a political inconvenience. It's a disease. And I intend to cure it, even if it starts with your daughter. The pause. Then her tone turned sharp. Be careful, Mr. Williams. You're stepping into territory that could destroy careers. He stared out the window, his reflection cold and resolute. Then let's start with the right ones. The line went dead. Marcus placed the phone down, exhaled slowly, and looked at Chloe. Get me a list of every executive who's approved a seat override in the last 6 months. Her eyes widened. You think it's a pattern? He nodded once. No, he said. I know it is. Outside his office, cameras were already waiting. Inside, the quiet man who had been forced out of his seat had just stepped into a battlefield much bigger than a flight, one where race, power, and politics collided head-on. And this time, he wasn't sitting quietly. The next morning, the boardroom at Horizon Holdings was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the faint tapping of Marcus's fingers on the polished glass table. His laptop screen glowed with lines of coded access records, pulled from deep inside Horizon Air's internal network, the VIP override system. Across from him sat Chloe, her eyes darting between the monitor and the door. Sir, if anyone finds out you're pulling raw data from the airline servers, this could blow up internally, she warned. Marcus didn't look up. It's already blown up, Chloe. I'm just finding the spark. He scrolled through hundreds of seat reassignments, each tagged with an override authorization. Look at this, he said. Over the past 6 months, 112 seat overrides, 97 of them in favor of white passengers. 73 of those overrides displaced minority travelers. Chloe's voice trembled. That's a pattern. No, Marcus said quietly. That's a system. He clicked open a folder labeled Archive Transactions. The system hesitated for a moment before revealing a list of names, executives, VIP passengers, and override approvers. His eyes narrowed when he saw one name repeated over and over. Bill Pierce, Director of Customer Relations. Lauren Pierce's department has been approving these overrides for months, Marcus said. Her name's on almost every high-priority reassignment, especially when it involves a specific type of passenger. Chloe leaned closer. Meaning? Marcus turned the laptop toward her. Black professionals, Middle Eastern families, even foreign diplomats. All quietly shifted from their original seats. She gasped. That's discrimination written in code. Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed with a message from Harold. Need to see you. Top floor. Now. Marcus closed the laptop and stood. Keep this drive secured, he said. No uploads. No emails. If something happens to me, you deliver it directly to the board. Chloe froze. If something happens to you? Sir, what are you expecting? Marcus gave a faint smile. Truth makes enemies. When he reached the top floor, Harold was waiting outside the executive conference room, looking uneasy. Marcus, he said under his breath, we've got a problem. Someone tipped off legal. They know you've been digging into the system. Marcus frowned. Let them know. I'm not hiding it. Harold's eyes darted toward the frosted glass doors. It's not that simple. Richard's under pressure. The board is divided. Half of them want a public audit, the other half wants this buried. And Senator Pierce's office just called again. Marcus folded his arms. Let them call. I'm not negotiating truth. Harold exhaled, rubbing his temples. Marcus, you're walking into a war zone. They're going to try to paint you as emotional, as a liability. Marcus looked him straight in the eye. Then I'll give them logic. And evidence. He opened the door and stepped inside. The room fell silent immediately. Every executive was seated, the CEO, HR director, PR head, and 3 legal counsels. On the far end sat Lauren Pierce, looking perfectly composed, dressed in a crisp white suit that mirrored her practiced innocence. Marcus took a seat at the opposite end of the table, his expression unreadable. Richard Halloway cleared his throat. Mr. Williams, we've convened this emergency session to discuss your ongoing investigation. While we appreciate your efforts, we've been advised by legal to ensure the scope of your inquiry remains limited. Marcus tilted his head slightly. Limited to what? The truth. Lauren smiled faintly. Limited to what's relevant, she said smoothly. We can't afford a witch hunt. This company's reputation is fragile. Marcus leaned forward. A witch hunt implies you're looking for something that isn't there. I've already found what is. He opened his laptop and turned it toward the room. The screen displayed color-coded graphs, timestamps, and passenger data. 112 seat overrides. 97 benefited white passengers. 73 displaced minorities. These weren't random. They were approved by your department, Ms. Pierce. Lauren's expression didn't change. Data can be misleading, Mr. Williams. You're pulling raw numbers without context. Marcus smiled faintly. Context is what makes the numbers damning. Richard's tone hardened. Marcus, we're not disputing your findings. But if this goes public, we'll lose billions in stock value. We're asking you to delay your report, at least until we can manage the message. Marcus looked around the table. So you'd rather protect stockholders than passengers? Richard's jaw tightened. You're not the only one trying to do the right thing here. Lauren interjected quickly. And what exactly are you accusing me of, Mr. Williams? Doing my job. Marcus met her eyes. You're not doing your job when you weaponize privilege. The air in the room snapped like a wire pulled too tight. Lauren straightened in her chair. You have no proof those overrides were racially motivated. Marcus reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single printed page. Actually, I do. He slid it across the table. At the top was an internal email, marked confidential, sent from Lauren's corporate account 3 months earlier. Please prioritize VIP requests for our premium clientele. Avoid pairing them with passengers who might make them uncomfortable. Use discretion. The room went silent. Angela, the PR director, read it twice before whispering, "Oh my God." Lauren's face went pale. That's taken out of context. Marcus's voice stayed calm. Then explain the context where avoid pairing them with passengers who make them uncomfortable doesn't mean discrimination. Richard slammed his pen down. Enough. We'll handle this internally. Marcus looked at him steadily. No, Richard. We've been handling it internally, that's the problem. Harold stood from the back of the room. He's right, he said quietly. If this leaks, and it will leak, it'll look like we tried to hide a racial profiling system. Lauren turned toward Harold sharply. You're siding with him? I'm siding with the truth, Harold replied. Richard's face hardened. Everyone calm down. We're not airing this in public. Marcus closed his laptop. You don't have a choice. Lauren's voice turned cold. You think you can strong-arm a senator's daughter? You'll regret this, Mr. Williams. Marcus stood. If integrity is a risk, I'll take it. He turned to leave, but before he reached the door, 2 corporate security guards entered. One of them hesitated before saying, Mr. Williams, we've been instructed to collect all data drives related to the investigation. Chloe's warning echoed in his head. If something happens to me. Marcus's tone was razor-sharp. Who gave that instruction? One guard looked nervous. Legal department, sir. Harold immediately stepped in. Hold on. That's not protocol. Lauren cut him off. It's protocol when sensitive data is involved. We can't risk leaks. Marcus locked eyes with her. You're not worried about leaks. You're terrified of proof. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small flash drive, and placed it on the table. You want evidence? There it is. But it's just a copy. Lauren frowned. Copy? Marcus's lips curved into a faint smile. The original's already in federal hands. The room went dead quiet. Richard slowly rose from his chair. Marcus, what did you do? Marcus looked him dead in the eye. I did what this company should have done a long time ago, tell the truth. He turned toward the door, but before he could step out, Lauren's phone buzzed. She looked down, her expression darkening. Then quietly she said, You just made a powerful mistake, Mr. Williams. Marcus paused at the door. No, he said, glancing back. I made a necessary one. As he walked out, Harold hurried to follow him, whispering, You realize you just detonated the whole company, right? Marcus didn't stop walking. Then maybe it needed to explode before it could rebuild. But as they exited the boardroom, a black sedan pulled up outside the glass tower, tinted windows lowering slowly. Inside, a man in a dark suit with an earpiece spoke into a phone. He's moving. Do we proceed? A voice on the other end, firm, female, and unmistakably political, replied, Make sure he understands the cost of defiance. Marcus stopped for a moment, glancing toward the street as if sensing something unseen. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. Now the truth is out, and the people Marcus just exposed will do anything to silence him. High voltage. If you've watched this far, you know this fight isn't just about one man, it's about justice itself. Backhand index pointing right, hit that subscribe button right now, because what's coming next will shake everything you thought you knew. Speech balloon and drop your thoughts below. Do you think Marcus will survive what's coming next, or will power win again? The city was quiet that morning. Too quiet. 4 days, Marcus's name had dominated every headline, every debate, every news cycle. But this morning, there was a shift in tone. What began as a story of humiliation had turned into a movement. Protesters gathered outside Horizon Airlines headquarters, holding signs that read, Equality takes flight. No more silent seats. Justice for Marcus, justice for all. Inside, the boardroom was packed. The air was thick with fear, tension, and expectation. Executives shifted nervously as the Federal Civil Rights Bureau officials filed in, led by Agent Simone Grant, carrying a thick case file. Harold stood near Marcus, his expression steady. You ready? He whispered. Marcus adjusted his cufflinks and nodded. Always. Simone began calmly, her voice cutting through the silence. The Bureau's investigation uncovered a pattern of discrimination embedded into Horizon's VIP system, automatic prioritization of certain racial demographics under the pretense of client preference. These actions violate multiple federal civil rights laws. Gasps rippled across the room. Simone continued, Effective immediately, Horizon Airlines will be placed under federal supervision. Executives directly linked to this program, including VP Lauren Pierce, are to be removed pending prosecution. All eyes turned toward Lauren, who sat frozen, pale and rigid. You can't do this, she hissed. You don't understand who you're dealing with. Marcus finally spoke, his tone calm but commanding. I do. I'm dealing with people who thought privilege was stronger than justice. Lauren's glare could have burned steel. You'll regret this. Marcus stepped closer, meeting her eyes. The only thing I'd regret is staying silent. 2 federal agents approached her, presenting an arrest warrant. The click of handcuffs echoed through the room like thunder. Cameras outside the door flashed, the moment the world had been waiting for. Lauren's voice trembled as she was led away. This isn't over, Williams. Marcus replied evenly, No. It's just beginning. Hours later, Marcus stood outside the courthouse surrounded by reporters and flashing lights. The crowd erupted as he appeared, not as a victim, but as a symbol. He stepped to the podium, the sun hitting his face, his voice steady and full of purpose. When I boarded that plane, I was just another man heading home. But what happened that day reminded me, silence never protects you. It only protects the system that mistreats you. He paused, looking out at the crowd of people from every background, every color. What we saw wasn't just racism, it was the casual acceptance of it. And today, that ends. Applause rippled through the square. Marcus continued, voice breaking slightly with emotion. This isn't about revenge. It's about change. It's about every person who's ever been told they don't belong, every voice that's been silenced because speaking up was too costly. Today, that cost has been paid, in full. Behind him, a large digital billboard lit up with breaking news. Horizon Airlines launches One Sky Initiative, nationwide equality program led by Marcus Williams. Reporters leaned forward as Marcus smiled faintly. From today forward, no passenger will be judged by the color of their skin, their name, or their background. Every flight, every seat, every service, equal. Because that's how it should have been from the start. The crowd erupted. People cheered, clapped, and some even cried. The same man who was humiliated at 30,000 feet was now standing as the architect of a new policy that would change air travel forever. Simone approached quietly as the crowd's energy swelled. "You did it," she said. Marcus smiled softly. "No, we did it. The truth did it." Later that evening, Marcus sat alone on a rooftop terrace overlooking the city. The chaos had faded into calm. He held his phone in his hand, scrolling through messages, thousands of them. Messages of support, gratitude, and inspiration from people all over the world. One message stood out. "Because of you, my son said he wants to be a SEAL one day, and not be afraid to be himself." Marcus closed his eyes, the weight of it settling in. He exhaled deeply, the fight, the pain, the fear, all of it finally finding peace. Harold joined him with 2 glasses. "To what's next?" Marcus smiled. "To justice finally taking its seat." They clinked glasses as the city lights shimmered below, the night air warm and still. A week later, Marcus returned to the airport, the same airline, the same terminal, but everything was different. Passengers of all races sat together in first class, laughing, reading, resting. No special treatment, no whispers, no stares. A new banner hung above the gate. "Welcome aboard, everyone deserves a seat." As Marcus walked down the jet bridge, the new flight attendant smiled. "Welcome, Mr. Williams. It's an honor to have you back." Marcus nodded. "It's good to finally be home." He took his seat, the same one he'd been forced out of weeks earlier, but this time, there was no tension, no prejudice, only calm. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this flight represents a new beginning. Today, we fly under one sky, together." The plane lifted off the ground, sunlight spilling across the wings. Marcus looked out the window, his reflection blending with the clouds, free, equal, whole. Justice had finally taken flight. And that's how one man's courage turned humiliation into history. Raised fist, medium dark skin tone. If Marcus's fight for justice inspired you, don't just scroll, show your support. Backhand index pointing right, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because more real-life stories like this deserve to be told. Speech balloon, drop a comment below. What would you have done if you were in Marcus's seat?